quiet hospital lobby. A nurse typing, a child crying softly. Suddenly, a stray dog charges in, barking furiously, startling everyone. It doesn't run wild. It beelines to one door, Dr. Lennox's office, and begins to growl. Everyone laughs, until Dr. Lennox tries to shut the door. The dog snaps. A second later, a scream echoes from inside, and in that moment, everything changes. This wasn't supposed to happen. St. Mary's General was known for its calm, sterile routines, not chaos. Dr. Lennox was their star physician. Polished, prestigious, untouchable. But that dog didn't care. And somehow it knew the truth. The hospital was its usual blend of tension and exhaustion. Nurses scribbled notes, patients dozed under harsh lights, and doctors walked with robotic precision. At 3:07 p.m., the automatic doors slid open without anyone pressing the button. Nobody noticed at first. A blur of brown and matted fur sprinted through the entrance. It wasn't until someone screamed, "A dog! There's a dog inside!" that everyone turned to look. It wasn't just any dog. This one had purpose. It didn't sniff around, didn't stop for food. It ran, as if it had been here before, dodging wheelchairs, skirting past startled nurses. Straight ahead, it charged through the hallway like it had memorized the layout. Security guard Emilio saw the tail whip past him and cursed under his breath. He'd dealt with strays before, but none that had the intensity of a bullet. The dog skidded to a halt in front of Dr. Lennox's private office, paws splaying across the polished linoleum. Then it growled. Not a warning growl, but something deeper, focused, personal. From behind the glass, Dr. Lennox's head snapped up. The dog locked eyes with him, low rumbles vibrating through its chest. "Sir," Emilio said slowly, eyes flicking between the dog and the doctor. "Was there someone else in your office?" Dr. Lennox blinked. "Of course not." The dog growled louder, and then lunged. It didn't bite. It didn't attack. It crashed past the doctor's legs and rushed into the room. Lennox shouted, stumbling back. "What the hell is going on?" Chaos erupted. Nurses ran for help. Emilio chased after the dog, unsure of whether to stop it or follow its lead. But when he entered the office, what he saw made him freeze. A girl, no more than 17, slumped in the corner behind Lennox's desk, tied to a chair, a rag stuffed in her mouth, and fear wide in her eyes. The silence afterward was deafening. The nurses outside didn't understand what had just happened. Code was called. Security flooded in. Someone called 911, not for a medical emergency, but for something far worse. Dr. Lennox tried to speak, to explain, but his voice trembled. The girl sobbed once the gag was removed. "He said no one would ever believe me," she whispered. She looked at the dog and whispered, "He saved me." And as the crowd stood in stunned silence, Emilio looked down at the dog, whose fur was patchy, ribs visible, tail still low but no longer stiff. Who was this dog? Detective Sarah Montrose was the first officer on scene, a seasoned investigator with little patience for theatrics. But even she was struck silent when she entered the office. After getting a full report from staff and EMTs, she walked out to the main lobby, where the dog now sat obediently beside Emilio, licking a minor scratch on its leg. "You're telling me the dog just knew there was a girl in there?" she asked, skeptical. Emilio nodded. "He didn't go near anyone else. Just that office." Montrose narrowed her eyes. "That office is soundproof. There's no way he heard anything. And yet," Emilio gestured behind them, "he did." The girl was taken to safety. Her name was Lila Carter, a missing teen from a neighboring town. Gone for 11 days. Her disappearance had been national news. Dr. Lennox claimed he found her and wanted to help, but panicked. No one believed him. The story made headlines before the ambulance even pulled away. But for Emilio and Montrose, the real mystery was the dog. No collar, no microchip, no tags, and no one had ever seen it before. But somehow it knew where to go, who to stop, who to save. And that made Montrose's skin crawl in a way no crime scene ever had. "This dog," she said, crouching in front of him. "What are you?" The dog looked up with quiet eyes, then rested its head on its paws. Peaceful now, like it had done what it came to do. Outside St. Mary's Hospital, a media circus had begun. Flashing cameras, shouting reporters, protesters holding signs that read, "Justice for Lila," and "Is your doctor safe?" But inside the hospital's small administrative wing, Detective Sarah Montrose wasn't interested in the noise. She was focused on the stray dog curled at her feet, the dog that had somehow led them to a kidnapped girl hidden in plain sight. No one knew where it came from, but she was determined to find out. The conference room smelled of stress and stale coffee. A projection of Dr. Lennox's profile glowed on the screen. "Dr. Marcus Lennox," Sarah began, addressing the small task force seated around her. 49 years old, Harvard-trained neurosurgeon, nationally recognized. 0 priors, 0 complaints, until today. She clicked the remote. A photo of Lila Carter appeared, blurry, taken months before her disappearance. "She's been missing 11 days. No ransom, no leads. And today, we find her gagged and tied inside his locked office." She clicked again. Now an image of the dog, ears up, eyes fierce. And this dog, this random stray, finds her first. The room fell silent. "We ran his prints, if you can believe that," joked Officer Patel, trying to cut the tension. "Nothing." Sarah didn't laugh. "Then we keep digging. Because this dog didn't just stumble in. It went straight to her. We find out how. We find out why." Dr. Lennox sat in the cold interrogation room, wrists cuffed to the table. He looked more disheveled than he ever had. Tie undone, sweat beading at his temple, lips trembling in fury. "I didn't hurt her," he insisted again. "I found her at a rest stop. She looked sick. I brought her here to help, then panicked." Detective Wyatt, Montrose's partner, leaned forward. "Panicked? So you tied her to a chair and gagged her?" I didn't mean to tie her. I just didn't want her to run." "You mean escape?" Lennox slammed the table. "She was going to tell lies." Wyatt exchanged a glance with the two-way mirror. There it was. The slip. Lennox exhaled. "That dog has been following me. I don't know how it found me here." "You're saying the dog is stalking you?" Wyatt raised an eyebrow. "I'm saying that dog knew." He shivered. "It knew what I did." Back at the hospital, the dog refused to leave the lobby. Emilio had tried calling animal control, but when the officers approached, the dog bolted, only to return an hour later. "He acts like he's watching something," Emilio told Montrose. "Or someone." Sarah crouched in front of the dog again. "You showed up right when we needed you. But how?" She noticed something this time. A small scar above the dog's right eye, shaped like a half moon. Familiar. "I've seen that mark before," she whispered. She pulled out her phone and opened the Lila Carter case folder. One of the first photos showed a flyer taped to a gas station door. Missing, girl and dog. The dog next to Lila in the image had that same scar. "Oh my God," Sarah breathed. "You're hers." In a quiet hospital recovery room, Lila Carter sipped water as a nurse checked her for. Her parents had arrived hours ago, clutching her like she might disappear again. But Lila kept asking one thing. Where's Max? Who's Max? Her mother asked. The dog. He saved me. When Montrose entered, Lila sat up immediately. Did you find him? Sarah smiled. He found us. Tears welled up in the girl's eyes. Can I see him? Sarah hesitated. He's still at the hospital, but he's not doing great with strangers. Lila nodded. He doesn't trust people anymore. Not after what we've been through. She paused, then whispered. He followed me when I ran away. I didn't even tell him. But he found me. Sarah frowned. Ran away? Dr. Lennox offered me a ride. Said he'd take me to the bus station. But instead, she trailed off, eyes clouding. I knew I messed up. But Max, he didn't give up. The pieces began to align, but not in ways Sarah liked. Max had somehow tracked Lila across multiple towns and through a city hospital's maze to one specific office. That kind of tracking wasn't just natural. It was obsessive. We need to understand what this dog is capable of, Montrose told Wyatt later that night. Because if it could find her once, maybe it knows more. You want to use the dog as a detective? Wyatt raised an eyebrow. No, I want to follow him. Montrose had animal control build a temporary enclosure behind the hospital, just fenced enough to observe Max's behavior. She placed 3 hospital staff members nearby, including Emilio. Max ignored them all. But when she brought in a janitor who had worked in Dr. Lennox's wing, a man no one had suspected, Max growled. It was faint but distinct. Sarah turned to the others. He recognizes him. That janitor, under pressure, eventually confessed. He'd seen Lennox sneak the girl in late at night, but hadn't reported it out of fear. The dog had remembered. And now it was clear. This dog wasn't just Lila's protector. He was a witness. Max, now no longer just a stray, was at the center of something much bigger. Dr. Lennox was behind bars. But the question still hung in the air like storm clouds gathering. How far would Max go to protect her? And what would happen if he felt she was in danger again? For most people, the story should have ended there. The girl was found. The doctor was arrested. The dog was hailed as a hero. But for Detective Sarah Montrose, something didn't sit right. And for Max, the dog who had growled down a monster, the fight wasn't over. Because even though Dr. Lennox was in custody, someone else had slipped through the cracks. Brain flashback, the second man. Sarah couldn't sleep. It was 2:37 a.m., and her mind kept replaying a detail from Lila's interview. He said he'd be right back. But then another man came in. He smelled like smoke. Not Dr. Lennox. Someone else. Someone who hadn't shown up in security footage. Who hadn't been listed on any employee records. Who had come and gone like a ghost. She sat up in bed, heart pounding. What if Lennox wasn't working alone? Back at the temporary enclosure, Max had started acting different. He no longer barked at strangers. He barely reacted to food. But if someone passed by smoking, even faintly, he growled, ears flat, body tensed like he was ready to pounce. Sarah and Officer Wyatt watched from the surveillance tent. He's reacting to the scent, Wyatt noted. Sarah nodded slowly. Smoke. That's what Lila said. They tested it again. 3 hospital staffers walked by, one of them smoking. Max ignored the first 2. But the moment the cigarette smoke curled through the air, he lunged. Not viciously, not randomly, but with terrifying precision. Wyatt shook his head. He's not just reacting. He's remembering. Sarah requested a second sweep of Dr. Lennox's office. The crime scene team had already bagged evidence. But this time, she went in herself. She crouched beside the small corner table and saw it, an ashtray, Only one cigarette but inside. But Lennox didn't smoke. It hadn't made the original report. She bagged it and sent it straight to the lab. Hours later, the call came through. DNA match. The cigarette belongs to Kevin Marks, former paramedic. Fired last year. Sarah's heart dropped. Marks had access. He knew the hospital layout. And worst of all, he'd vanished 6 months ago. Lila's case was no longer just a kidnapping. The FBI joined the investigation, and what they found was disturbing. Marks had been involved in a string of suspected trafficking cases. Girls disappearing from hospitals, shelters, even ERs. All without a trace. Dr. Lennox's name had never appeared before, but now the link was undeniable. One girl rescued by accident had uncovered a network. And the one who cracked it? Max. Sarah returned to the enclosure with a shirt belonging to Kevin Marks, borrowed from his sister's old apartment. She didn't say a word, just held it out to Max. He sniffed once, then turned toward the exit and barked. Once, sharply. Sarah exchanged a glance with Wyatt. Open the gate. They let him out. Max began trotting down the sidewalk, nose low, body alert. They followed in an unmarked car, a few blocks behind. He led them past rows of apartment buildings, a construction site, and finally, down a cracked alleyway behind a closed veterinary clinic. Max stopped. He stared at a rusted back door and barked 3 times, just like he did outside Dr. Lennox's office. Sarah's blood ran cold. Sarah didn't wait. She called in backup, and within 15 minutes, SWAT was on site. They rammed open the back door. The inside was grim, dark surgical lights, cages, drug paraphernalia, and monitors. Live security feeds. One of them showed a different room entirely. A girl curled in the corner, sobbing, blindfolded. Sarah stared at the screen. She's still here. They tore through the building and found her. She wasn't Lila. She was younger, barely 12. Her name was Nina. She'd been missing for 3 days. She didn't know where she was. But Max had found her. The media had a field day. Stray dog uncovers child trafficking ring. The dog who smelled justice. From stray to savior. The hero of St. Mary's. People flooded animal shelters hoping to adopt a hero like Max. But Max wasn't ready for adoption. Not yet. He was recovering at the precinct, resting on a donated orthopedic bed, flanked by treats and letters from children around the country. Sarah sat beside him one night, gently stroking his fur. You knew. You remembered everything, even when we didn't. She smiled. I think you've done more police work than half the department. But then came the twist. 2 nights later, Sarah received a package. No return address, just a flash drive. On it, surveillance footage from a week before Lila's kidnapping. It showed Kevin Marks shaking hands with a man in a hospital coat. Not Lennox. Someone else. Then a frame froze. The second man's face was unmistakable. Sarah's boss, Chief Medical Officer Peter Holbrook. Max wasn't chasing ghosts anymore. Now the ghosts had names, and one of them still walked free, in the very hospital that had trusted him. The next bark might not come in warning, but in final judgment. The hospital lobby was quiet again. Patients shuffled in and out. Nurses charted vitals. Doctors moved with practiced calm. But Detective Sarah Montrose stood still in the center of it all, watching, waiting, calculating. Because now she knew. The monster wasn't gone. He was still here. Chief Medical Officer Peter Holbrook. The man who smiled at press conferences. Who shook hands with the mayor. Who signed every protocol meant to protect patients. He was the one hiding in plain sight, and only one witness had ever dared to bark in his presence. Max. Sarah played the flash drive again, frame by frame. Kevin Marks, the ex-paramedic, met Holbrook outside the hospital's underground staff lot. They talked, exchanged a thick manila envelope. Holbrook looked around, then laughed. The type of laugh a man gives when he thinks he owns the world. Sarah clenched her jaw. It all made sense now. Lennox was a pawn, a surgical brute. But Holbrook? He was the architect, and he was still seeing patients, still touching children. Max had been different lately. After rescuing Nina, he'd stopped growling altogether. Not at strangers, not at noise, not even at the smell of smoke. It worried Sarah. He's shutting down, the department's vet said. Post-traumatic stress. In animals, it's real. He's trying to forget. But Sarah didn't need him to forget. She needed him to remember. One more time. So she walked him through the hospital lobby again. He didn't bark. But the moment Holbrook passed by, Max stopped. He didn't growl. He didn't move. He simply sat and stared, eyes locked on Holbrook's every step. Sarah turned to Wyatt. He knows. But knowing wasn't enough. They had no legal grounds. The flash drive was anonymous. Holbrook's name wasn't in the trafficking files. His signature wasn't on any of Lennox's transactions. Sarah took the footage to the DA. It's suspicious, the prosecutor said. But not evidence. You need more. Holbrook was untouchable. Unless he slipped. Sarah put together a sting. They reopened the abandoned wing of St. Mary's under the guise of a new child psych unit. They wired every room with hidden cameras, staffed it with undercover agents posing as interns, nurses, and maintenance crews. Sarah planted bait, a confidential patient file on a young missing girl, supposedly found near the hospital, just enough to tempt a handler looking to reclaim property. The file had one access point, Holbrook's secure terminal. They waited. 2 days passed. Nothing. Then, just before midnight, the terminal lit up. Someone had logged in using Holbrook's keycard. Sarah watched from the surveillance van, heart racing. Holbrook entered the records room with a hospital tablet tucked under his arm. He scrolled, paused, pulled out a burner phone, took a picture of the girl's file. Gotcha. But just as SWAT prepared to move in, Holbrook turned and walked away, down a corridor, toward the loading dock, and disappeared into a service elevator. Sarah shouted, "He's escaping!" Max, watching the screens beside her, let out a low, sharp growl. It was back. The tension in his shoulders, the tremor in his nose. Sarah grabbed his leash and ran. They tracked Holbrook's signal to a warehouse on the edge of town. Inside were cages, needles, restraints, and in the back, a freight elevator connected to a tunnel beneath the building. A transport network. Children could be moved unseen, like cargo. Holbrook stood by the elevator doors, phone in hand, speaking softly to someone. The files were fake. Someone's setting us up. We pull out now. Burn it down if you have to. He turned to leave, but the doors burst open. Sarah stepped in, gun raised. Behind her, Max growled, deep and primal. Holbrook froze. Holbrook tried to run. Max launched. His bark echoed through the metal rafters like a warning shot. He didn't bite, just blocked, forcing Holbrook to trip into a pile of crates. Seconds later, he was in cuffs. The FBI took over. Dozens of files were recovered from the warehouse, each one leading to more arrests. The trafficking ring had roots in multiple hospitals. But it had started here. With Holbrook, Max became a national symbol. News anchors called him Justice Dog. He got medals, ribbons, offers from Hollywood studios. But Max didn't care. He still didn't play fetch. He didn't do tricks. He didn't wag for attention. He only barked when it mattered. Sarah sometimes sat beside him in the police garden, watching the sun go down. "You saved more lives than most of us ever will," she whispered. Max rested his head on her lap and sighed. One evening, a girl with dark hair and freckles visited the station. It was Lila. She knelt beside Max, hands trembling. "I didn't get to say goodbye." Max slowly approached, sniffed her hand, then gently nudged her chest and rested his head there. Lila began to cry, but this time they were tears of healing. But just when Sarah thought it was over, a message came through. A prisoner transport van, carrying Kevin Marks, had crashed en route to federal custody. The guard was injured, the driver dead, and Marks gone. Max sat up that night in his sleep and barked once, loudly into the dark. The morning news barely mentioned the crash. Just another accident on Route 7. A prisoner transport van flipped and burned. One officer in critical condition. The other, a rookie, said the last thing he remembered was Kevin Marks saying, "We both know I won't make it to court." Then darkness. But Sarah Montrose knew better. She didn't buy the story of the crash being random. Kevin Marks had escaped, and somewhere out there he was watching. Sarah returned to her desk. The case files were closed. Holbrook was in solitary. Lennox had made a plea deal in exchange for testimony against dozens of conspirators. The trafficking network was unraveling. But Sarah couldn't relax. Not yet, because something still didn't make sense. Why did Marks come back to the hospital that day with the flash drive? He wasn't there to confess. He didn't expect to get caught. So why did he come back? That's when Sarah remembered. The flash drive Marks left had one folder labeled "Replacements." Inside, encrypted files, most corrupted, some fragmented. But the IT team had recovered one line of metadata. Siblings, same donor, untraceable, easier to control. It wasn't just about trafficking. It was about creating children. Sarah whispered aloud, horrified, "Cloning! No genetic design." Marks hadn't been exposing the ring. He was purging it, removing liabilities. He didn't come to confess. He came to make sure no one else could. And now that the case had been blown open, he would finish what he started. That night, Max woke Sarah up by pacing the room. He stood by the window, tail stiff, ears locked. Then he did something he hadn't done since the beginning. He barked. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. Each time louder, urgent. Sarah rushed to the window. Across the street, under the flickering light of a street lamp, a figure stood, short, hooded, and holding something in his hand. A leash. The figure wasn't Marks. It was a child. Thin, pale, eyes wide with confusion. Sarah ran outside. Max beat her there. The boy flinched at first, but Max approached gently, like he knew. Sarah knelt down. "What's your name, sweetheart?" The boy blinked. "I don't know." Pinned to his jacket was a note. It read, "I'm not one of them. Please help me before he comes back." Sarah looked up, but the street was empty again. The boy was taken to a pediatric trauma center under federal protection. They ran DNA. What they found stunned everyone. The boy shared partial genetic markers with at least 14 missing children from the trafficking database. He wasn't a clone. He was a spliced construct, a genetic cocktail made to resemble multiple targets, designed to mimic missing kids in order to deceive grieving families or fake recoveries. But more than that, he had markers from Kevin Marks himself. Marks wasn't just the recruiter. He was the donor. And this boy, he was a blueprint. After meeting the boy, Max refused to leave his side. He guarded his hospital bed like a soldier. Doctors tried to separate them for tests. Max growled. For the first time in weeks, he barked again, sharp, warning, alive. Sarah finally told them, "Let him stay. He knows something we don't." And she was right. That night, the hospital cameras caught movement outside the emergency exit. A shadow, a figure. Sarah rushed in. But by the time she got there, the window was cracked, and on the floor was a burner phone. On it, one message: "You saved one. I'll make 10 more." The FBI traced the phone's origin to a shipping facility near the docks. They raided it. Inside was a lab smaller than the last but more advanced. Gene editing tools, embryo tanks, child-sized clothes in sealed drawers, and a digital blueprint labeled Project Aeon. Sarah clicked open a folder. A name popped up: Patient Zero Max, Canine Neural Imprint Study. She froze. Max was part of it? Buried deep in the files was a video. It showed a room. A man, young Kevin Marks, stood over a litter of puppies. "They bond better than humans," he said to the camera. "Dogs don't lie. Dogs don't forget." He injected one puppy with a small implant, then pointed to a child nearby. "Watch." The dog growled, not at the child, but at the man next to him. "Imprinting," Marks explained. "He knows who's dangerous." Sarah put it together. Max wasn't just a rescue. He was a test subject, trained, genetically nudged to detect patterns of abuse, to protect, to remember trauma signatures. That's why he always knew, why he always barked at the right moment, why he saved Lila. He was engineered to do it. But what the files didn't say was how much of that was science and how much was Max's heart. Sarah knew Marks would return for his project, so they waited at the docks, quiet, still. Hours passed. Then, from the shadows, a boat. A figure stepped off, face covered, until Max growled. Sarah stepped forward, gun drawn. "Don't move, Kevin." Marks turned slowly. "Detective, I was hoping you'd be here." "You're done," she said. But Marks smiled. "I was trying to make the world better, safer, smarter. You used the dog, just like I did." "No," she said, tightening her grip. "You built a tool, but he chose to be a hero." And Max lunged, not to bite, just to knock him flat. Marks was arrested. For the second and final time. The labs were dismantled. The children in development were saved. The boy, later named Leo, was adopted by a trauma nurse who helped with his care. Max retired, but not to a quiet life. He lived with Sarah. He played with Leo every day in the backyard. No more cases, no more danger, just sunsets, chew toys, and naps on the porch. And once in a while, when a stranger passed too close, Max would stand up and bark, just once. A reminder that heroes don't always wear badges. Sometimes they have paws. Thank you for joining us on this unforgettable journey of courage, mystery, and the incredible bond between a dog and the truth he refused to let die. If this story moved you, made you think, or simply reminded you of the power animals have to change lives, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with someone who needs to see it. Subscribe for more real, emotional stories that reveal the hidden heroes among us. Some with 2 legs, and some with 4 paws. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and never ignore the bark that might just save a life.